Time now to turn our attention to the international newspapers. Elena's here in the studio, and you're starting with something a little bit different, fallout after last night's Republican debate.
Yes, let's have a look at how that went down in the US media. Let's look first at the Daily Beast. They've got an analysis of the candidates' different economic policies and, above all, how they hope to get millions of Americans back into work, because it's probably on this terrain of the economy and soaring unemployment that this election is really going to be fought. The article said, now, what are the candidates offering? Well, the writer says those unemployed Americans aren't going to be getting the help they need anytime soon, regardless of who's in the White House. Well, why not? They say that Mitt Romney's plan is far too long-term. He's aiming to encourage business by negotiating free trade deals and reforming corporate tax and so on. But even he admits that probably won't create any jobs within 4 years of his coming to power. And Rick Perry, his Republican opponent, has made a lot of his record as creating jobs as governor of Texas. But the article says that's been dependent on stealing jobs, really, from other states by creating less regulation in Texas, whereas obviously that's not going to work on a national level because they've got no other states to pinch the jobs from. So they say the best plan currently on the table is Obama's, but that still might not necessarily create jobs in the short term. They say in order to make any difference, it's going to have to go through Congress completely unscathed, that is to say, in its current form. And given the partisan political atmosphere currently in the US, when those Republican candidates might not agree on much, but they do at least agree on the need to block Obama at every possible step, the chance of that bill getting through are very small. So not great. It doesn't look great for those unemployed Americans, according to the Daily Beast.
No, and the British press, they're talking about something different once again. David Cameron's visit, in fact, to Russia yesterday.
Yes, there's quite a lot of criticism in the British press, actually, today, because he didn't really bring up those human rights issues like the lawyer working for a British company who was beaten to death in police custody recently, or the extradition of the suspect in the Litvinenko case, which has poisoned relations between Britain and Russia for a long time. The Guardian is especially critical. They have a piece headlined, "To Vladimir Putin, David Cameron is a useful idiot." What do they mean? Well, they say by going there, Cameron is legitimising an increasingly autocratic approach on the part of Russia and a growing crackdown on human rights abuses. They say that the £215 million of trade deals that Cameron signed aren't really worth the bad publicity that he's created by legitimising Putin in this way. They say that European leaders need to stand up to Russia on the terrain of human rights, and until they do, they look craven.
Now, I gather you've also pulled out something which is incredibly dodgy in a way. The Independent, they've got a headline which looks like really bad news for the Chancellor, George Osborne.
It looks really bad. It's Osborne feels the pain of dominatrix's claims. This is actually less salacious than the headline writers are making out. It's actually about phone hacking and about the former News of the World editor, Andy Coulson. Now, the Independent thinks they've worked out why David Cameron decided to hire him as head of communications, even though at the time that appointment was controversial. And now it looks like a dreadful political decision, looking at what we now know. Now, they say Osborne recommended Coulson to Cameron to pay back a favour that Cameron had done for Osborne when he was News of the World editor. What was this favour? Well, according to a lawsuit filed by a former dominatrix madam called Natalie Rowe, Coulson covered up photos showing Osborne taking cocaine with her in the early 1990s. Now, Osborne completely denies that he ever had a friendship with this woman, and he denies that he ever took cocaine, but there's a lot of coverage of this in the British press today.
And I imagine it will continue as well. And finally, something you pulled out in the New York Times.
Yes, just quickly. Who do you think, Stuart, said in a 1964 interview that General de Gaulle was an egomaniac, that Martin Luther King was a phony, and they thought female members of Congress were lesbians?
I cannot guess at all, and I leave you to reveal the answer.
It was former First Lady Jackie Kennedy who gave, this is one of the only interviews of her in the months immediately after JFK's death, and the New York Times have dug up the transcripts of this tape, and they're being published in a book, and they reveal part of them today, and as you saw in those extracts, she doesn't mince her words.
I should have looked at the script. It's written here, but I didn't have time. All right, Elena, thanks very much. That's Elena there with the international papers then here on France 24.